When we turn to the first page of the Bible, the beginning of everything, the beginning of the beginning in a sense, one striking aspect as we read down through that chapter or first few chapters there is that in the beginning there is organization, there is structure, there's pattern, there's order. Okay? Not at the very beginning. At the very beginning, we're told that there's waters, and they're just out there, and they're dark, and they're doing their thing. Nobody knows what they're doing. But the first day of creation, God brings light. Okay? He brings light on those troublesome waters. Let's go this way. And from that moment on, we see this pattern that in creation. Day follows after day. The evening and the morning were the first day. The evening and the morning were the second day. Day follows day. You can see the light comes on day 1. The sun and the heavenly bodies come on day 4. We see that the sky and the water, the ocean are separated on day 2, and the birds and the fish populate that space on day 5. And then on day 3, dry land and vegetation appear, and the animals and Adam and Eve show up in day 6. And so there's this symmetry, this pattern, that one thing leads to another before God's rest. But we're also told that that we get in these patterns as they're telling the story. So the evening and the morning of the first day is one of those patterns that sort of helps to tell the story, helps to keep it moving along. You've got the symmetry to help remember how do the 6 days relate to each other. And there's another one in there that it'll talk about the animals are producing after their kind. And so the cows are giving birth to cows, the horses are giving birth to horses, and so on. And so there's this structure, the way things are supposed to be. But remember, it begins with this void. It begins with this chaos. And then God comes in and creates organization and structure. And it tells us something about God. God is orderly and intentional. With this in mind, when I think of the Garden of Eden, I don't know what your picture, I think we all have pictures, right, of the Garden of Eden. And it may just depend which children's Bible we had when we were young. But my picture of the Garden of Eden looks something like this. It's very organized, right? And the fruit trees are on one side. There's a special place for the root vegetables. The trees that don't have fruit are in another part of the garden, and that's how I picture it, right? It's all laid out. And the job of Adam and Eve is to walk around the garden with trimmers and keep everything neat and orderly, okay? Make sure the rabbits don't get into the carrots and all that sort of thing. That's kind of what I picture the Garden of Eden looking like, because God is orderly, right, and organized. I can even find a verse that supports this image. In 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 33, we find that God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. Okay, and so that looks tranquil, doesn't it? No chaos in that garden. But then as I get to thinking a little bit more about creation, I have to concede that while order and design does exist throughout creation, there's also a lot of chaos. I want you to think of the part of the planet that contains the greatest biodiversity of anywhere else, the Amazon basin. And while there are complex systems within the Amazon basin trees that are dependent on animals, animals that are dependent on trees, different levels they've discovered. There's the animals that live up in the tree canopy, the animals that live down on the ground and how they relate to each other. There's how the water and the evaporation and everything takes place and maintains it. And so there's complex systems in there. And that means like there's organization, and if things break in one place, the whole thing starts to break down. And so we could say, oh, that's like very organized, very ordered, but yet there are no hedges for Adam and Eve to trim in the Amazon. Right? And so it's also very chaotic. God may know where every particular vine is. He may know where all the ants are and the piranhas in the Amazon basin. But from our perspective, we can't get through. We need a machete. We've got to hack our way through in order to try and get anywhere. It's impenetrable. It's chaotic. It's somewhere that we're not easily able to go. It's untamed. And yet we acknowledge that even in that state, it's beautiful and it's essential to the life, not just of that area, but to the life of planet. And so we find in this sort of view of creation that it contains both order and a degree of chaos at the same time. And I think as humans, as people, we tend to try our best to bring order to the chaos that we see in creation. So a river floods, what do? We build dams, right? We regulate the flow. We bring order to it so that we can live where we want to live. Now there may be other things, problems that are created, but we stopped at flooding. There's a swamp. It has mosquitoes. They make people sick. Besides, a developer wants to build a whole lot of houses or condos on that swamp. What do we do in an area that's inhospitable, that we can't just go in there and live long term on our own? What do we do to the swamp? We drain it, don't we? We get rid of that swamp. We've tamed the wilds. Okay? And it's the sort of the story of civilization as it advances. It seeks new things to contain, to tame, to organize and to order for our benefit. But it's not a simple task. Nature comes at us. Right? Nature doesn't just give in. And so I think it's one of the great lessons of the coronavirus, that it taught us this lesson, that no matter, we're justifiably proud of the advances we've made in medicine, nature has not been subdued. We're not the captains of our own ship. Right? We don't determine our own destinies. There is still chaos that's beyond our control. In fact, I think this picture gives us perhaps a better idea of what our relationship with nature might be. In reality, though, God's world contains both of these, doesn't it? It contains those places where when we walk away, nature just comes back. Right? It's not defeated. It's maybe contained for a little while. But there are also places where we have tamed and created beauty. Tremendous design on the one hand, vast amounts of unpredictability on the other. And perhaps Eden itself was more like the picture on the right, I don't know. But the jungles and the swamps that existed around Eden didn't happen by accident either. And so Eden didn't cover the whole world, right? And so whatever that garden was, there was land outside of it. And it wasn't all negative kinds of chaos. It was just wild creation. And God called it good. His calling of creation good wasn't just in the garden. It was in the jungles, in the deserts, in the swamps, in all those places that we might say, I don't know if I can go there. And he's like, that's all right. It's not being made for you right now. And so there's this contest between chaos and order. And God, in a sense, is a creator of both. In a sense. Ultimately, God is the answer to chaos. And what seems chaotic to us isn't. Just as we look at the Amazon jungle and we go, or a swamp or whatever it is, we go, we don't need that. Right? That's chaotic. We can't control it. Let's get rid of it. And God says, no. Like, there's a reason it's there. It looks chaotic. And it is for you. But I put it there for a purpose. Now, believe it or not, that brings us to Christmas. If I ask you, what would make a perfect August? Or what are the colours of May? What are the songs that we sing in February? I think we'd get a fair array of answers, or maybe people just wouldn't answer. Would we want August to be hot or cold? Arnie, you don't get an answer. Would we be on vacation in August, in our ideal August? Would we be getting ready for school? Would we be working? Would we ideally be in Rochester? You see, our expectations of what August might be vary widely, depending on what's going on in our lives. But when it comes to Christmas, our society has created a very standard set of expectations, very idealized set of expectations. Let's just look at a few of those. First of all, we're dreaming of a white Christmas, aren't we? We also know that there's no place like home for the holidays. Okay? We want to be with family and friends. There will be presents under the Christmas tree. Mummy just might kiss Santa Claus, okay? It's the most magical time of the year. For many people, it's one of the few times they attend church each year. Okay? And we're going to talk about love, joy, peace, and hope. And we can all look at that and we go, yeah, that's Christmas. If I said, what am I talking about? If I took out like the Christmas and the Santa, but if I said, what's the most magical time of the year? Anybody going to say, oh, March? Maybe some basketball fans, I don't know. But we know these expectations, the language that we have around Christmas. And there's a pressure, in a sense, to live up to that. To recreate what we see perhaps in television, movies, other people's, Facebook or social media posts. And so this pressure says that the expectation for Christmas is that we want everything to be perfect, don't we? Just for one day of the year. Can we all get along for just one day of the year? If it's going to be one day of the year, can it be Christmas? Okay? I don't care about December 28th. Right? But on December 25th, can we all get along? Can everything be perfect that day? And that brings us to Jesus. You see, Jesus might be sinless, but there was a lot about his birth that was messy. And I'm not just referring to the physical process of birthing. In fact, I want to suggest this year, over the next 3 weeks, that we may be more accurate to wish each other a very messy Christmas. Okay? a very messy Christmas. Because despite humanity's best efforts to calm the chaos, Jesus arrived in a messy world, didn't he? He didn't come because the world deserved him. He came because it needed him. And this is why in John chapter 1, also we saw it in the reading there from Matthew, we're told that the light, Jesus, shines in the darkness. And we could use lots of different metaphors there, but the idea is Jesus is bringing order to chaos. He's shining light into darkness. He's unraveling that ball of string that's just in the closet that you can't use because it's all just a great big knot, you know, and whatever our chaos, whatever image it is that Jesus is coming to fix that. He didn't come because the world deserved him. He came because the world needed him. And so our efforts to take control of the season can obscure the reasons that we need Jesus. We seek in this season of perfection to obscure our messiness. It's just like the snow covers my lawn. I want a white Christmas because my yard looks so much better in a white Christmas. Right? And I think we do that in other areas of our lives. If I bake the best Christmas lunch, I'm going to look better. People won't talk about the things that I've done to upset them. If all my family's here, we can obscure the hurts and the reasons we're not here more often than we are. And so Christmas creates this veneer of perfection. And there's a pressure for us to do that. Now, I don't want to suggest that Jesus took a wrong turn on his way to finding Mary and Joseph. But there was a lot about the circumstances of his birth that were more messy than magical. Only 2 of the Gospels tell of Jesus' birth. And Matthew is one of those. And Matthew is very succinct. If we didn't have Luke, we would have a very different Christmas. Joseph would be very much more prominent. Because Matthew focuses on Joseph. The angel comes and talks to Joseph in Matthew chapter 1. And Joseph is a mess. Right? Joseph is a mess. You don't send an angel to give someone a message that, hey, you really should go to Passover this year. Yeah, it'd be good to go to Passover. You haven't been for a while. You really should consider it, Joseph. Right? There's probably a rabbi that's going to do that. Or a family member. But you send an angel when there's a difficult message to deliver. When there's a message that may not be believed if it comes from a human mouth. You send an angel. And so an angel appears to Joseph. And the angel comes to Joseph at a point where he has learned that Mary is pregnant. That's all he knows. He doesn't know who the father is. He doesn't know how this happened. He's reconsidering his future. We're told that his plan is to divorce, even though they're not married, but to end the relationship. And it's at this time that the angel appears. Now, we can run down through the series of events. We can run down through what's happening in Joseph's life. But I want you to think, what about the emotions that come with that? What does Joseph feel on the day he learns that Mary is pregnant? How long does he stew on it? How long does he think about it, going, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? Before he decides, we'll not make a fuss, we'll just end this relationship and go our separate ways. There's a father out there somewhere, she's going to have to work it out with him. And so he's in turmoil, right? What's it like going for him to go to work the next day? What are his plans for the future looking like at this point? Initially, he's looking forward to marrying Mary. Right? There's this sense of ecstasy, of excitement, and then when she's pregnant, devastation. And then as we read now, the angel appears, and the angel says, well, Mary hasn't been unfaithful. The conclusion you've drawn is not what has happened. And then Joseph wakes up. The angel says they should still get married. How does Joseph feel at this point? Do you think he feels excited? Oh, it's okay, I get to marry this girl again. People won't think bad about me. I don't think it's that. He starts off happy, he becomes devastated. The angel says, the child's from God, you should marry Mary anyway. And Joseph's like, I don't know, somewhere in the middle there, isn't he? Yeah? Like, okay, if you say so, but I'm not real sure what's going on. Doesn't make sense. You see, when he wakes up, I think Joseph would have a lot of questions, wouldn't he? Right? And aren't you thankful that Joseph didn't just dismiss this as a crazy dream? As the consequences of eating cold pizza for dinner last night? So, Joseph is a mess, even after the angel comes and talks to him. Because his world still doesn't make sense. He's just had this conversation. The angel had given Joseph some more information. It wasn't just that Mary's going to have this child and you need to be a father to the child. He said, the angel tells Joseph, here's the name that you are to call the child. That name is Jesus. Jesus, if you didn't know, is simply the Greek word for the Hebrew name Joshua. So there's a good chance that running around his house, Jesus was called Joshua by his parents. And it's significant not just because it connects to the Old Testament character, Old Testament person Joshua, but because the name itself means the Lord saves, God rescues. And so it's a significant name in that sense. And then also he says this will be the description, fulfill the description Emmanuel, which means God with us. So there's these two sort of names or titles. One is God with us, and the other is God saves. And so the angel says to Joseph, this is what the name you're to give him. In his book, Hidden Christmas, Tim Keller makes this observation. The angel tells Joseph what he is to name his boy. In that patriarchal culture, it was the father's absolute right to name his child. He had complete rights over his children, and naming was a sign of his control over the family. The angel, however, takes that away from Joseph. This is what you're going to call the child. You can't call him Gideon, son of Joseph, is going to be God saves. Joshua. Jesus. What a mess. Joseph is like already trying to struggle with his relationship with Mary. Okay? There's probably younger woman who he's got these questions about her faithfulness and their relationship, their marriage going forward. Whatever he thought it was going to look like, it's now going to look like something else because this wasn't the way that he expected it to begin. And now he's sort of got these questions, perhaps if depending on his own level of security or insecurity, questions about his manhood, about his role as the patriarch, the leader of the family that he wants to have. He's not even getting to name his own child, his firstborn, into his family. What a mess. His life at this point is out of his control. But if we look at the very last words of Matthew chapter 1, they give us some insight into the character of Joseph. Because after all this mess, after all these doubts, all these changes, all these unmet expectations, we're told he gave him the name Jesus. He accepted his role. I think there was still a lot that Joseph didn't understand. Right? Now, Matthew doesn't give us the story of the shepherds and going to Bethlehem and the stable and or the manger and all that, right? We don't have any of that here. We just are told that she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus. The angel gave Joseph two very simple tasks, really. And he fulfilled them both, even if he didn't understand them. He stayed married to Mary, and he named the child Jesus. And so the mess didn't go anywhere, but he remained faithful through the mess. And it was this mess that Jesus was born into. A father that didn't know what was going on. I mean, does any first-time father know what's going on? But Joseph, I mean, you usually have some idea what's going on. How'd we get here? But Joseph is like, I don't even know how we got here. And he's got this son. And he's got the word of an angel that he's to be the father to this son. And so Joseph obeyed, despite the doubts, despite the insults that I'm sure were thrown their way, despite the difficulties, despite the mess. Joseph obeyed God. And this is our challenge this morning. It's our challenge for the week. It's our challenge for whatever is ahead. Will we welcome Jesus into our mess? Will we welcome Jesus into our mess? Because I can't tell you how many people I talk with, how many people I hear from, and they're like, oh, I can't become a Christian yet. Oh, I can't come to church yet. I've got to sort something out. I have to fix the mess. Okay? Or maybe it's I can't get involved in this ministry at the moment. I've got something going on in my life. I've got to fix that. It's like, all right, well, fix it. But that's the first response. The second, more gracious response is that Jesus comes into our mess. Jesus finds us there. And so we don't have to decorate the house. We don't even have to leave out the milk and the cookies, right? We don't have to cook the turkey or the ham. Jesus comes into our mess. And the question is, are we going to let him? Are we going to give him access to those parts of our lives Or are we going to put a veneer over our lives and say, I'm really good, Jesus. I'm glad you came. I remember someone telling the story of saying how they like to go and visit, do open houses. Or maybe it was not just houses that were for sale, but sort of, big houses where they do tours or whatever. And they said the thing that this couple did when they went on those tours was they enjoyed everything about them, but one of the things they did was look for the room that was locked. Because they knew that in the room that was locked was where the shovels were, where the boxes were, where the things that were messy were, that they just didn't have another place that looked neat, that looked inviting. And so they wanted everybody to come through their house, come and check it out, admire it. We've invested in it, we've worked, it's got blood, sweat and tears, equity in it. Come and have a look. But don't go into the locked room. And I think sometimes we think, well, Jesus is holy. Jesus is clean. Jesus is perfect. Jesus doesn't have any sin. But Jesus is all of those things, but he came to a world that he knew was messy. And that's why I said at the beginning, he didn't come because we invited him or we deserved it. He came because we needed him. And so we're going to insist on cleaning ourselves up first. Or are we going to give Jesus access, control, ability to change and to challenge our lives? Jesus didn't even come to earth to celebrate our perfection. He came to live among us. John's Gospel, sort of chapter 1 there, gives the idea he moved into our neighborhood to join us in our mess. And so your cousins may not understand if you just invite them over to your house for a messy Christmas. But at least on a spiritual level, don't try and sugarcoat your relationship with Jesus at this time. Jesus' birth, not even worrying about the stable, not even worrying about the location, but Jesus' birth on earth is a reminder that he's okay mixing with our mess, because that's what we need. And if you've never invited Jesus, if you've never connected with him or invited him into your mess, then I encourage you to talk to me, talk to someone this morning and say, what's that look like in real life, right? Those words, invite into mess, I know it sort of sounds like something, but I don't know what it looks like. But I'd love to sit with you and talk about that, as would any number of other people here. And if you have been a Christian, then take some time in prayer. Maybe talk to someone and say, what's it look like for this part of my life to invite Jesus into it? I'm so glad that Jesus came to earth. Not just because of where he's going at the end of his life, but because he came to where I'm at. He didn't make me climb the mountain to get to him. He came to find me in my mess, you and your mess.